he can't have children. All of that is playing in the backdrop of their minds. And so Sarah gets desperate, and she begins to engage and tap into what is called surrogate parenting. Surrogate parenting is nothing new in the last 30 years. It goes right back to Genesis. And she does something where she goes to her husband, and she has this idea that he can sleep with one of her servants. And if he sleeps with one of her servants, she becomes pregnant because she owns the servant. That means she will own that girl's baby. And if she does that, everything is going to be fine. How many families under pressure have acted out of desperation and created problems that reverberated for generations to come?
Sorry.
Oh,
Double sorry.
Double sorry, if you would. Amen, I like that. I'm going to steal that from you. Say it next week in my own church. Guys, are you watching this? What I'm trying to set up, everybody, what I'm trying to set up is some stuff that you can see in a family in one generation, and you're wondering, where did that come from? If you were just to open all of the doors and step back a few generations, you begin to discover that this is not new. You begin to discover that the seeds were already planted for some things to come about. So we know in this situation with Abraham and Sarah is that the whole thing blew up in their faces, and that she convinced her husband to do this, and he did it, and knowing that this was not such a healthy thing. And you remember the story that when it blew up, when that young lady began to become sassy and insolent and insubordinate, when it came to Sarah, that Sarah was upset. She wanted to wring her neck. Abraham said, do to that young girl anything that you want to happen to her. And it was a mess in the family because they got Ishmael when God wanted them to trust him and get Isaac. So now you got introduced into the family a boy who got the same daddy as Isaac, but got different what? Mothers. Are you watching this? There is nothing new under the sun. So now, if you fast forward back to Genesis chapter 36, where we started last night, remember the whole situation with Jacob and Rebekah is that Rebekah could not conceive. Rebekah could not have children. And this is something that the other generation dealt with. And so the question would be, what happened then? How will they deal with it now? And so we get to Genesis 36. We saw last night that Jacob is so in love with Rebekah that Rebekah finally has children after Leah, her sister, has given him several children, and he's gotten his handmaidens pregnant, and they've given him children, that Jacob did something pretty crazy. He only loved the children that came from Rebekah, Rachel, even though all of them were his children. So we got the situation that we left off with last night. Now watch this. Now, when you get to this evening, what you got is that you got the young boy, Joseph, who certainly is his dad's favorite. And he is not wise enough, and he is not humble enough to keep some things to himself. So remember the story that he ends up getting a vision from God, and God is telling him that your life is going to be one incredible life. He ends up believing, as God is telling him, that your brothers will bow down to you someday. Even your parents will bow down to you. And you would think that if he has had a prophecy and a vision spoken over his life, come here, Nana, that everybody will begin to say, his brother will say, wow, that's great, Joseph. We're proud of you. Joseph, you're going to go places in life, and we're happy for you, Joseph. Go as far as you can. That didn't happen that way. You've been in a family where people can't celebrate each other? You've been in a family where people are almost soured about the fact that something has happened for another, that people should be cheering them on, but they turn on them? How many have seen that before happen in families? Well, that's what's happening in this family right here, and it's all there in the Word of God. And so here is what happens, straight from the Word. Genesis chapter 37, you got your Bibles tonight. I'm beginning at verse 5. And I'm going down to verse 11. Here it is. Joseph had a dream. And when he told it to his brothers, listen what the verse says. They hated him all the more. In other words, the hatred for him did not start at that point. I am always amazed that in some families, people just don't dislike each other. Sometimes it is pure hatred. And I've been around families where they can't even be in the same room. I'm looking at a family right now that the sisters cannot even talk to each other. They haven't talked to each other in years. I happened to do their dad's funeral a few years ago. And the family is a huge family. They were packed out there in front of me, but the fact is there was drama all in that family. That there were sisters who hated each other sitting out there in that family. And it's amazing that when funerals come about or weddings come about, all kind of stuff begin to come up in those families. You ever noticed that before? I've noticed it. Now watch this. It says, Joseph had a dream. Brothers hated him all the more. He said to them in verse 6, listen to this dream I had. We were binding sheaves of grain out in the field when suddenly my sheaf rose and stood upright while your sheaves gathered around mine and bowed down to it. His brother said to him, do you intend to reign over us? In other words, you already got the coat. You got everything else. And now you're going to say this to us? Something should have went off in Joseph's mind that these are not the right people to talk to about this at this point. He says, listen, he says, I had another dream. You should have stopped at the first one. Don't tell us a second one. He says, I had another dream. And, you know, I want to say, I'm screaming at the Bible at this point. I'm saying, Joseph, shut up. just be quiet. Don't say anything else about your dreams. Look at me, everybody. You got to be careful who you tell your dreams to. Everyone is not for you. Everyone is not excited for you. Look at the person beside you, touch the person beside you, and tell them, you can't tell your dreams to everybody. Let them know on both sides. Let me talk to my young friends over here. My young friends. My young friends right here. My young friends right here. Hey guys, as you grow up, you're going to have dreams about your future. And my young folk are here, my young ladies and young men, and you got to be wise enough to understand that most times family will be supported, but you can't share your dreams with everybody. You're going to be careful who you share with, even those things that God has told you. If you believe that, everybody, would you say amen? And so here we are, is that I want to tell Joseph, just be quiet, man. They already hate you. Just be quiet. But somehow, Joseph cannot read what is going on in his family. Sometimes, somehow, he is naive to think that they're all for him and they're not all for him. By the way, everybody, I'm going somewhere tonight. I want you to hang right with me. Watch this. Now, we looked at multiple generational things. Watch this. This is where it gets a little more interesting right here. His brother said in verse 8, do you intend to reign over us? Will you actually rule over us? And they hated him all the more because of his dream or what he had said. Then he had another dream, and he told it to his brothers. Listen, he said, I had another dream. And this time, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars are bowing down to me, and you're saying, this boy is on drugs right now. He really is. First of all, your brothers, and now, so you're going to tell us another dream, and now you got the sun, the moon, and he said he is, if I were in America, we would say that boy is tripping right now. But since I'm not in America, how do you say in the UK? That boy's crazy at this point. He is not understanding what's going on here. He is not understanding that there's some issues in his family that his daddy has created. And their mothers have created. And that these kids are the second generation for Jacob and all of his wives. And those kids are turning out with the same drama that you saw in previous generations.
Go for it.
It is.
Go for it.
Now watch this.
Go for it.
Watch this.
Let's up here.
Verse 10. When he told his father as well as his brothers, his father did what? Rebuked him. Now hold it. Talk to me, everybody. You just told your dreams to your mama and your daddy don't want to hear it. At some point, you got to figure out, Joe, there's something happening in your family. Watch this. His father rebuked him and said, what is this dream you had? Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow down to the ground before you? His brothers, and here it is. His brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept it in mind. Watch this, wife. I have seen parents who see situations that are happening in their family and they say nothing. They say nothing. And that's what I want to end up with tonight on this particular thing here. I call it the silence that goes on in families. Where there are situations that have occurred. This is just one situations. And people simply do not talk about things. It's amazing in our families how much we don't talk about. It's best left unsaid. We don't want to stir the pot with things, to use a colloquialism from the American South. It's best to think that no one is even aware of it when everyone is aware of it. There are things that can happen in families that people go year after year after year and they never talk about it. Sometimes we know that there was, and how do I say it? And I want to say it because I got a mixed young audience here, so I want to say this at a higher level. Sometimes we know that sometimes adult members of the family have done things to children, and there's a silence. There's a silence.
For sure.
We know is that there have been multiple marriages in this thing, and we don't know whose child that is. We don't know whose child that is, and we say nothing. The silence that goes on in our homes, and here is God who is saying, I want to free you from all of this. Well, God is saying that I don't want you to have the tensions that go on sometimes in our families if we can only open our mouths to speak about things. Sometimes when it comes to married couples, there are hurts and there are pain that they have gone through as a couple and they don't talk about it.
Well, preach it.
And it's like they're living lives as strangers in the same house.
Say it again.
And it just happens over, and you're saying, are you aware your children are watching this? Are you aware that this is unhealthy, that your children are seeing, that as they watch you practice marriage, that you are modeling before them what their own marriage can look like? And you wonder why it's repeated in generation after generation? Why is it that I can live with the same woman or the same man for years and we have tension and no one ever opens their mouth to say, enough of this. We got to solve this.
That's right.
We got to bring healing to this.
Solid.
Because we are so concerned about upsetting things that we suffer in silence in our families year after year after year. And one of the things that God does, God says, I want to free you from that. God says, I want you to understand that I can restore no matter what is happening in your family. I can restore. I don't care how many generations this go on, year after year and generation after generation. God says, I specialize in healing. Now, I want you to hear what I'm about to say to you as I end this evening. One of the dilemmas of our particular denomination is that we're not always sure how to deal with brokenness. We prefer to deal with each other as though we're all perfect without realizing that sometimes we're broken. Let me give you an example. When there is a church where people can understand that there will be care when there's brokenness in their family, sometimes divorce does happen. So on Sabbath morning, we end up praying for who? The married couples, but we very rarely pray for those who are struggling with divorce. We very rarely pray for those where it's all over and now they're trying to figure out, where do I fit in the church? Right. When my life now is one that others are aware that things did not work out. That's right. We don't know how to deal with brokenness. And so because we don't know how to deal with brokenness, people cannot relax and say, I'm hurting. This is not working for me.
Say it again.
Life is not working. This is causing me pain. Who do you talk talk to in the church when we do not allow people to be broken.
Preaching.
And the fact is, all over the church are people that are broken.
Makes sense.
They don't have a theology of that.
Double broken.
We don't talk about that. Elder Henry Wright, that you are aware of.
Serious.
Elder Henry Wright was my college professor. How many remember Elder Henry Wright? Elder Henry Wright was my college professor. He also was my conference president. And then Elder Wright ended up becoming one of the major leaders in the Columbia Union, which is on the mid-eastern part of the east coast of the U.S. Something came out while he was in that position where it became clear that he had a moral fall some years earlier. And things just came out. In fact, in my last church, I ended up pastoring that young lady. When things happened, I ended up in his office, and I saw a man that was broken. But I watched a man where God took his brokenness and God began to use him to a point that when he was placed in a church, a very small church, and the church ended up just exploding in growth. Because for the first several years of that church, Adventist church, a number of people who had gone through bad times in their lives began to gravitate to that church. People were going through tough times in their families where things didn't work out, and they were censured, and they were judged in other congregations. They began to gravitate to this particular church, of where they felt a safe place. And because their pastor was vulnerable about his own journey, it made it a safe place for others to say, it's okay to be vulnerable with my own journey. I want to say to everybody, what people are looking for today, especially young adults, they're looking for churches that are safe places. And sometimes our churches are not always safe places to be broken. And the whole essence of the gospel is that the gospel deals with what? Brokenness. That's the gospel right there. And when you follow Jesus' ministry, Jesus was always ministering to who? The broken. They catch a woman in adultery. They haul her before Jesus and they say, what are you going to do with her? What are you going to do to her? Not what are you going to do for her. What are you going to do to her? And Jesus says, no, I'm not going to condemn her. She already feels the condemnation. But there's some churches in this world that you would go through and they would say, just throw her out. She didn't deserve to be here. She can never serve in the church ever again. She's not worth anything. And we put her in the back row and said, you're welcome to come. Just say nothing. Be invisible in the pews. And Jesus said enough. And when she was expecting him to do her like the church people did, because you remember those men were what? Church leaders. Jesus said to that girl, I don't condemn you. Go and sin no more. You got Zacchaeus, who is broken. Zacchaeus is an outcast in this culture. He's a collaborator with the Roman government, but he's also Jewish, and he and his kind, who were tax collectors, they were never invited over to Sabbath dinner. They never came to the temple on Sabbath morning. They never got to Reading West on Sabbath morning. They didn't participate in the potlucks and the dinners at the church on the second floor. He never came to church, because if he came to church, he was an outcast. And so when Jesus came to the city of Jericho, he was not coming to the church folk, because the church folk always gave the impression they had it together. They never felt safe enough to open up about their own brokenness. And so when Jesus came to the city, he came from one person. He came from Zacchaeus. And he knew what his needs were. He knew his hurt. He knew the brother was lonely at all times. He knew he wanted community with somebody. God and Jesus knew he wanted to be a part of some group of people that loved him despite his job. To love him.
Say it again.
And when Jesus spoke to him, Jesus simply said, Hey, Brad, my brother, I'm going to your house today. That was radical. Because why would you ever walk into a tax collector's house? And they all heard it. And immediately, just on that action of love, the Bible says that he just began to melt. He began to weep. And he says, you're going to my house? Oh, not me? Are you talking to me? And Jesus, I'm talking to you. He says, Zacchaeus, today, salvation has come to your home. What I'm trying to tell everybody, that Jesus is attracted to brokenness. And what breaks the heart of God also must break our hearts as well. And we never say to people, always be perfect, always keep it together, never demonstrate that you got some things that are going on. And by the way, everybody, that's not the church. That's a nice gathering of people, but that's not the church. The church is saying, I need you, Lord. I need you. Oh, I need you. God, I went through that divorce and that thing tore my heart out because I never thought I'd be divorced in my life. And God, I feel so alone. God, I got to raise the children now. God, all by myself, I don't have the money to do it. As the brother would say, I'm without my family for the first time in my life. I'm living in a flat that's about as big as a piece of paper, and my family is living over here. I'm having to support me and them, and I'm not sure what to do. I had standing in the church. I served in the church, and now when my life has fallen apart, no one is caring or is even there. What will happen if we gave each other permission to show our hurts and our scars and our brokenness? And by the way, tonight, everybody, I don't know who you are, but if you can never share it with anybody else, you can always share it with Jesus, because he always cares. We pick this up on tomorrow night. Father in heaven, thank you so much, God, for your presence in this room. God, we decided together on last night that we are not going to paper over anything. We decided last night that our families are too important. We discovered on last night, without actually saying it, and we are seeing it again tonight, that Satan reserves his greatest attacks against our families. We're in a warfare here. And God, we're going to see that really displayed graphically on tomorrow evening. I pray for everyone in this room tonight who got brokenness in their life. I pray for those, Lord, who got things in their families that they can't really talk about and have not been able to talk about. I pray for those in this room tonight, those who have things that they are praying the church never finds out because they will be too ashamed for it to get out. God, make Reading West increasingly a safe place, a haven of hope. And as we sang the hymn tonight, a place of love, not only for those who have it together, but significant for those who don't. God, thank you for brokenness, but thank you for the Jesus and the Lord of the brokenness. And we bless you tonight, God. In Jesus' name, amen.
Solid. Double solid. Have another solid on that. Major solid.
Thank you for such a powerful and real message, Pastor Freddie. I don't know about you, but I'd like to thank God for the encouragement to accept and be willing to share the fact that I'm a broken person and I've got things going on. And I hope that you're all encouraged to make this a safe space that we can do that together and support each other in that. So just to close now, we're going to sing Love at Home. Okay, should we all stand? Please stand to our feet. Love at Home.
5-2, please.
There is beauty all around when there's love at home. There is joy in every sound when there's love at home.
That's the first and the last stanzas. First and last stanzas.